Well, welcome everybody to the September 19th Irvine International Academy regularly scheduled board meeting. It's 6:07 and the meeting takes place at the school site, which is 4782 Ferdinand Lane in Irvine, California. I want to welcome all guests, parents, and administrators to the meeting. In a moment, we'll have our roll call and call the meeting to order. We're going to begin with a recognition of one of our board members who is actually in China. That's Miller Huang. Miller, I'll ask for a acknowledgement as being present after I identify your address. I'm going to do my best. Maybe I should defer to Brett in pronunciation. Jim Guan, cell number 95-1, Guangwu Road, Dali, Yunnan Province in China. Miller.
Presence in a beautiful lake. Yeah, in a beautiful city. Yes.
You for sure. To my left, Molly Chang.
Present.
And Susan is present as well. And Brett Freeman. Present. And then also with us, Felipe Delgado.
Present.
And I believe David's son is unable today. Is that right?
He said he's coming.
Oh, he may come in person and then we'll identify him and acknowledge him when it comes. Great. Well, on our agenda, then our meeting is called to order with a quorum. Next is our Pledge of Allegiance. Our flag is up and to our left, just to the left of our brand new smart board that we are observing. I'm sure you're going to have the report. Could I invite somebody to lead us in the pledge?
I recommend Jada.
Jada, are you good? You can lead us. No, we'll stay at the table, place our hand over our heart, and when you're ready, you just tell us ready, begin.
Ready, begin.
I will the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and all.
Thank you very much. It's nice to have one of our young leaders. Thank you. If the board members would like to glance at the agenda for tonight, let me know if there's any adjustment, order or sequence. If not, when ready, I'll ask for a motion to approve the order of agenda as it appears. Okay, Brett Bigman, a motion second. Second. Okay, and in the seconds, and I'll just do a roll call vote. Miller. Agenda.
Yay.
Molly.
Yes.
Who's a yes as well. And Brett, aye. And that's the
Yeah.
wonderful. And the agenda is it's listed. No closed session items tonight. Roman numeral 2 or Roman numeral 3, which brings us to Roman numeral 4. We have opportunity for comment on any of the non-agenda items. Of course, agenda items will have another opportunity to comment. But anyone come to the board tonight? Okay, we'll move on to Roman numeral 5. Our information items, B2, our executive director report and our fiscal update with Alana Jones in person, but we'll celebrate that all in due time. Dr. Bean, thank you for previewing your presentation for us on this beautiful new smart board, which is tremendous. We don't have to get up out of our seats and turn around and look at a screen, and so it's gorgeous.
All right. Oh, I guess I should have the mic, huh?
Mic's right by the
Right here.
computer.
Here we go. All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. I think it should be a shorter meeting than usual. Here comes Mr. Sun.
This is perfect.
All right.
And we'll welcome David's son. Perfect timing. Sorry. We had our pledge, but no other business yet. So good to see you. And very glad you'll acknowledge that David's son is present with us as well.
All right, we're going to get started. Just a few things in the executive director report that I want to go over. First is that our enrollment today stands at 376. We would have had 377, but the parent still needs to produce some sort of immunization record. Once that happens, we'll be at 377, which is our goal. And that was supposed to be our goal by the first Wednesday of October, so we've already met it. And that number definitely should rise a little bit. We don't want to get too high, but right now we're 376. Wow. Should be at 380 shortly. The other thing is that, yes, as you see, all of our teachers receive their smart boards. So it is a smart board, touchscreen. They can project off of it. They can use their camera that projects to it. It's interactive. Students can come up, use a stylus and mark on the boards. So every classroom has one of these. What else? All right, now let's get into the meat of my report. So I'm going to give you a countywide charter update. Last time we talked about starting this process, and you wanted both Felipe and Brett to be a part of that meeting. So we met with our attorneys and shared with them the vision for what this looks like. So let me share what that looks like this evening. All right, here's the countywide charter timeline. As you can see in September, that's right now, and October, we are going to be in the process of changing our corporate name. Part of that is because we need to rebrand. If we're going to open up other dual immersion schools, we don't want to necessarily just be stuck to Mandarin. We want to open up to Spanish as well, or trilingual. So we need to rebrand our name from Western Mandarin Immersion Charter to, our recommendation is Orange County International Academies. So name it very similar to Irvine International Academy. Well, we'll call it Orange County International Academies. So if we change the corporate name first, this does not change anything with our federal ID number, doesn't change anything in regards to how money is funded, or how we spend money or paychecks, things like that. All that will change is the name. So our attorneys are going to do that on the back end. We're writing our countywide charter. So we're going off the charter that we just sent in with the material revision back in February. We're going to use that as a baseline, then rewrite it to include the things I'm going to talk about in a couple minutes. Then what we do is, in the next couple of months, we have to submit a request to actually do a school in a particular district. And so our attorneys are going to work on that with us. Finally, in November, we want to finalize the countywide charter. In the meantime, we have to submit our Prop 39 application to get this school back next year. And then we're going to form a foundation and establish a board for the foundation. This is a separate entity, nonprofit entity, foundation that will actually set us up to then expand. Right now, we have parent-teacher organization that raises money for us, but that's more for daily things that the school needs. This foundation needs to be formed so that we can start raising the bigger money to expand our organization. I'm in talks with one organization that, or one foundation that is looking to possibly give us $1 million over 5 years. So 200,000 per year to help us expand. All right. Then in December, our target, originally we're going to try to target November to submit the petition. That's going to be pretty ambitious. So I think what we'll do is play conservative. We submit the new petition in December. And when we submit the new petition, what happens is that then the OCDE has 90 days to hear it. Then the hearing will be in March. So December, January, February, and then March. Actually, yeah, January, February, March. It'll be in March. And at the same time, we look for a middle school, and I'll share this a little bit. Look for a middle school in Irvine. Now, if you notice, this timeline is really all about first rebranding, writing our charter. In the meantime, do this heavy load for Prop 39, create a foundation, and then implement our charters and find a facility. So let's talk about this vision a little bit. When we submit the petition and we feel confident that it's going to be approved, because the need is actually, the academic need is dual immersion schools across Orange County is very viable, very popular, very in demand. And so we could certainly, that's the approach that we're taking. It replaces the current charter. So Irvine International Charter School, will keep the name of this charter school, but it'll be under a new petition. Okay, so let me explain what that looks like. So here's the ambitious plan. If we get this charter approved, which we believe we will have, in the fall of 2024, that's a year from now, we'll have one elementary school, which is called Irvine International. Nothing changes there. And then we'll have one middle school, which we currently have. But I'm looking to relocate that middle school to another site in Irvine. Well, you keep this in mind because that's the pattern we want to do. Elementary school feeds into the middle school. Then in a year later, we want to, in parallel, open a second elementary school in another district. Continue having our middle school, but now open a small high school, 9th grade, for, guess who? These kids here that are matriculating. So now you'll notice how the one matriculates right here, right? So elementary goes into middle school. And then hopefully we have one high school, right? So we have middle school, they'll graduate, and then we go into high school right here for a 9th grade. So that's a total of 4 schools. The year following, and I'll tell you where we think we should move or where we should open one. But the year 2026, that Irvine International is one of our schools. Let me just put it this way. Irvine International is one of our schools. And then Santa Ana International Academy. So say we go into Santa Ana. Santa Ana International Academy, but the next year we open up a middle school and start maybe in 6th grade for Santa Ana International Academy. And we still have the IIA middle school. And then, as you can see here, Irvine International, we expanded to 10th grade. Then the following year, we add one more elementary school. So you can see the pattern here. IIA middle. Santa Ana middle. Then Santa Ana grade 9. And IIA middle goes into IIA high school grades 9, 10, and 11. And then we add one more elementary school. Let's say Tustin International Academy. Then the following year, we open a Tustin International Academy middle school. And then we continue to expand. Irvine International goes to 12th grade. So now our kid can graduate. And then Santa Ana International goes to 10th grade. And so I only put it in these 5 years because that's what you're supposed to do for 5-year charter. And then the pattern is the same. We open up elementary school, then a middle school, then a high school, and it goes diagonal like that. All right. So if we look back at the numbers, in this petition for 5 years, we hope to actually be very ambitious and have 9 schools. All right. Any questions there before we continue? Let's look at the timeline. Any questions? Welcome, brother. Yeah, good question. Right. That's actually a very good question, which we're going to cover in the last slide. Okay, but in terms of the process of why we're doing what we're doing, are there any questions?
Your background with the previous charter that had multiple site locations, you feel pretty confident from your past experience? Because it looks like you see it in your mind's eye, and I'm guessing that's from your past experience.
Yeah, I mean, all of the biggest hurdle will be facilities, right? Well, we have no problem with the facility here for Irvine, and the middle school, I think there's a likelihood that we can get into a big building from a Korean church, which is 2 miles down here. And we've been in conversation with that person. And then as we expand, that's what we need the foundation, because we're going to start to hire a group that does this work. They go and they find locations for us, and they negotiate for us. We just have to provide the finances to be able to put a down payment. If it's gonna be a new facility, or if it's gonna be Prop 39. Each year, we will apply for Prop 39 in that new district. Okay, but hopefully, we can get to a point, we just have our own facilities. So we don't have to apply for Prop 39 each year. For this to work, you have to have a central office, obviously. And so the central office is then where the executive director is housed, and then his staff, and then they support these multiple schools.
Yeah, question. In terms of location selection, so is there a particular reason to go in Santa Ana, Austin instead of the other way around?
Great question. Yeah. We can go in any direction, but we do want the next charter to open to be a Spanish building version. So Spanish is, the reason for this is, because it is much easier to find bilingual certified teachers in Spanish than it is Mandarin. So if we open up another Mandarin school, we would be competing against ourselves for the same teachers in the pool, right? So the next logical dual immersion school to open would be another language. So in this case, let's just say Spanish. Well, Spanish would then tend to lend itself toward more Santa Ana area. But it doesn't have to be there. It can certainly be tested, and that's why we're gonna put an ad hoc committee together to discuss these types of things. But I just threw in potential names up there, right? But those aren't final decisions, of course. But we could definitely go further south. In this model, we, if we get to this point, I think I said Huntington Beach as our our fourth school. So Santa Ana, Tustin, and then Huntington Beach, but it can totally look a lot different than that. And we do need to discuss that with that. We need to make those decisions to put into our charter. All right, any other questions about this process?
I have a question.
Yep.
So, you saw in the parents' score notices that adding Spanish to the after school program.
Yeah.
And thus potentially making the school here trilingual in education. And so is the idea to model that, so it'd be trilingual, let's say the Santa Ana location where the after school program maybe would be Mandarin or some other language?
So the idea is to have international schools. I think we'll write the petition in such a way that it leaves it open for us to do dual immersion or trial immersion. The problem with the current charter is specifically dual immersion Mandarin. So to answer your question, if we were able to open up a trilingual here, then yes, we would of course replicate that model. But I think the easiest thing to do right now is to replicate what we're successful in, and that's the dual immersion. And then potentially one of these other schools could be, right, one of these other schools could be a trilingual school, which then we would create a new model and replicate that.
Because I mean, having Spanish in our after school program there, it has no impact on the charter.
No.
Right? So,
No.
That's something that could be replicated at these other locations.
Yes. Oh, you mean like that additional language in the after school program? Yes. Yes, we could replicate that. For sure. Or when we get into middle school and high school, we can offer multiple languages, you know. And I'm hoping to do that with our middle school, is branch out from Mandarin to then Spanish as well, so that kids have two offerings.
I have a question about, ethnic school.
Yes.
Because it seems like I think the third year get to. Okay, so 2027, IAA will have a 11 grade. I was just thinking about the students, will they continue or do they have to go to? Okay, I have this in mind. They will have 12 grade.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about for other, IAA seems like would be fine. But the other school, Yeah, I see. I was just a little concerned that sometimes I think they will go through the program, by the time they're ninth grade, they like to stay together.
Yeah, and they would,
They
right?
would-
So they matriculate would, so they would have priority. So these ninth graders will now be the tenth graders, right? These tenth graders become the 11th graders. These 11th graders then finally graduate in 2028. So the 7th graders that we have here would be projected to be our first graduating class in high school for Irvine International. So which is a good question, because the petition will be written for TK through 12. Okay, so if you do that, then what can happen is that these students who start with us in kinder are allowed to go all the way through 12th grade with us.
Well, it gives them the opportunity.
It gives them the opportunity versus if our kids graduated 8th grade and we started another charter high school, they would actually not, based on lottery law, they couldn't just automatically go to the other high school. They'd have to go through lottery. But in this case, if we do one petition, then they have the priority to go into the next grade level at that school. Yeah.
Are you aware of any charter schools in the country that offer 2K to 12 with the dual immersion? Or
No, not a dual immersion model, no. Private schools, yes. Not public school. There is one county OCDE that has one countywide charter that goes from TK to 12, and that's Orange County Classical Academy. So we're gonna kind of model it to that, where they're gonna open up 5, I think, 5 different campuses in the next couple of years. So. Now, this is really ambitious. It may end up being half this, right? It may end up being, we only open up 2 elementary schools and, 2 middle schools and possibly 2 high schools. But to have 4 elementary schools, that's very ambitious. All right. Okay, so let's talk about resources and what we need to make this happen. So the first thing is that, yes, sorry.
go back, like, I just talking about it. So, you're looking at the idea, and then you just put cities up there.
Yeah.
But actually, it would be possible based on this model, even if the population and the demographics, right? Potentially, you could have another elementary school in Irvine.
Yes.
Right, because the way you've got it laid out here in 2025, you've got Santa Ana Academy, right?
Right.
But let's say demographics, volume, whatever you want to call it, doesn't pan out quite right, you could just change that to I-2.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
So you could actually end up still the same volume or amount of campuses.
Yes.
Campuses,
They're campuses.
but it may not be in Santa Ana, there could end up being 2 IA elementary schools,
Yeah.
2 middle schools, and maybe one high school.
Right.
Just because it's a Santa Ana and it's a one Tustin, and then maybe at that time in 2026, it makes more sense to go to Santa Ana.
Exactly.
So it would still follow in volume.
Yes. Yep.
So you're flexible.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, if the demand for Spanish dual immersion in Irvine is high, then why not? And we have a facility, why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
So it's not locked in to
Not locked in. Now, what we have to lock into the charter is the potential cities we want to go to. Yeah, and then we can develop there.
We could list out virtually all the cities.
We could, but we have to get approval, right? We have to get approval from those cities to be able to do a charter in there. So submit to local districts.
It's a district.
The districts, right? That's true. Okay, so good point. One last thing I just want to say before the last line. So when I read Aspire, the difference was that each of the schools were considered its own local education agency. a school district. Okay, just like this is a school district. But in a countywide charter, it's one district with multiple campuses. So all of those campuses results would conglomerate into one result for the charter. Does that make sense? All right, versus different campuses having different results in state of California. All right, okay, so here's what we need to make this happen. First, tonight you're gonna talk about and hopefully approve an ad hoc committee to support the executive director to do this in the next several months. We already had de facto a couple people, you guys wanna make that official. We do need a middle school site for this plan, so if you guys now start reaching out to friends in Irvine, if there are locations we could potentially house our middle school, let me know, and we'll go out there and make it happen. We're gonna need the resources for legal costs, because there's gonna be a cost to corporate name change, and a cost to the petition itself, and then the delivery of the petition. And then also filing these requests in these districts. And then also, starting the foundation. Right, these are all legal fees that we're gonna need to incur. Then, we're also gonna need to think about hiring a site principal for here, so I can do my job as the executive director and grow the organization. All right, so that's to answer your question, Felipe. We would find a principal that could lead this school very well. And that's really gonna be a discussion with the ad hoc committee or this board on when that would happen. Does it happen now because all of these things are due, or does it happen in the future? And that's gonna be part of the Lotto question as well, to see if when that money really starts to be able to come in to support and a principal here at this site. And then we're gonna need the foundation funds to drive expansion. So that's when really the fundraising happens to drive expansion, because we need that money for to find facilities. Okay, all right, any questions? Then I'm gonna be done with my executive report.
For that site principal, your thinking, what is your thinking on the timing? For the school year?
It would be at least no later than the middle of this school year. So we would try to put somebody in the next couple of months, 3 months. And then be able to run this school for the rest of the half this year, while I go and look for facilities and expansion of other places. All right. Okay, so so today you're gonna talk about ad hoc committee, and then you're gonna talk about this name change. My recommendation is on the agenda, changing it from Western Mandarin Immersion Charter School to Orange County International Academies. But you guys can discuss the final name change. All right, so that is my report. I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Houston.
Well, thank you, pretty exciting stuff, and, wow. I thought we were gonna catch our breath, but here we go. We'll be talking, so let's move on then to, our official update. Thank you, Delano, for coming in person. We always appreciate you, whether you're in Zoom or in person as well.
Yeah, we'll plug your computer into this.
thousand expenses, as you can see, our net income is negative 403,000, right? These things will sort of catch themselves up as we go along if our ADA holds true, right? August will show us a little bit more of this when we look at that next time. And in fact, by the time we meet again, we'll have September pretty much closed. So that will be a really good month to look at. One of the places where we get our first sort of snapshot will be as of October 31st. Your authorizer really, and for the lack of a better term, per ed code, we must produce a financial statement based on October 31st revenues and expenditures. And somewhat gives us a glance at, hey, look, are we trending in the right direction or did we overshoot our target, right? This is the year that we're not going to overshoot anything, right? You know, I'm saying this publicly because it's important for the strategic plan, for the plan that Dr. Bean laid out, for the plan that you're going to approve, for the plans that we're all going to have to manage, that we stay right within wherever this is for the long-term effect, right? Because what we do today certainly impacts us down the road, right? But the beauty about this school is that as a charter school, we're nonprofit, so we have this huge area where we can tap into outside funding, outside resources, and things like that. Our community partners, things like that, Friends of Irvine International, whatever have you, things like that. And Dr. Bean has mentioned that already, but I want to reiterate that we do have that flexibility or that potential to be able to do those wonderful things, right? So all of that will help what I would consider this area right here, this local revenue area. This is really where I would like for us as an entity, because we know what we're going to get from the state. And I will be the first to tell you now that as we, the resources are drying up. So there are no more, COVID funds that are out there. Some of the one-time revenues that the governor would sort of dole out in terms of, one-time resources are music grants, discretionary grants. Those things are, way bye-bye, right? Because our economy is just not in that place anymore. I want us to hone in on that because we're a global economy in California, to be quite honest with you. And while it may not look like it has an impact on education, trust me, it does, right? Because a lot of corporate taxes, a lot of the income tax, sales tax, property tax, all of those things impact 40% of the state budget, which goes to education. I want you guys to keep that in mind. Almost half of the budget for the state goes to K-12 education. That's a huge chunk, right? And so as we grow and as we move forward, we want to make sure that we have the resources to be able to do those things, because each and every one of those will potentially be several thousand students in a couple of years will depend on that. Our cash, we began the year here at 423,000. You can see at the end of July, we're at 364. This will continue to go down a little bit just because, again, we have expenditures that will cause us to do that. And again, as I said, the backfill will be at P1, P2. And I'm going to hold the school to do everything possible to identify potential holes in attendance. I would like for us to track, someone's absent 5 days, we want to know about that, right? So, and Dr. Bean, you guys are masters of this, and I'm telling you things you already know and probably already do it. But just for the board, right? We want to make sure that we're tracking that, because any absences or potential loss in revenues, right? Someone, and I know this happens. Parent says, hey, you know what? This would be a great opportunity for us to take a week's vacation. The off season, it's cheaper. Let's go. Kids are all in. Mom and dad are all in. Right? We want them here, or at least have some plan to where, and God forbid, with children, like taking work on vacation is, that's not going to happen, right? But we want to make sure that there are plans in place to make sure that we can recoup that ADA in the best way possible. Because when students are absent, that's money left on the table. That's money you can't get back. But there's a way for us to minimize that, mitigate that by making sure that there's a plan. And I know, as I mentioned with Dr. Dean and Mary Beth, that whoever's doing the attendance, really should be triggering. After 3 days, hey, let's check in with that parent. Let's make sure that, this isn't a long-term thing. They're going to be absent for a while. And if that's the case, then Dr. B can then initiate, you know, the homeschool, or if you will, what do you call that when you give them like the learning packet?
Independent study.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. And capture that ADA, right? So that's important. We don't want to leave any ADA on the table, right? We want to make sure that we maximize as much as possible. Because guess what happens? Next year, when we start the year, we're going to be funded on whatever that final P2 is. And we want that to be as high as possible because that impacts us next year for the first half of the year until we get to P1 again. Not much here to hone in on because, again, like I said, this is just 1 month out of 12, right? So there's really not a whole lot here going on. Most of the revenues will start to come in August, September, et cetera, although they're quite lower because they're, again, based on lower ADA. I'll take any questions that you may have on this. I'll go down to. Yes, sir.
The year-to-date budget.
Mm-hmm.
The budget, the based on the last year's budget, I mean, at the end of last year's budget, or, you know, this is the adjusted,
Brand spanking new budget, David. I'm glad you asked that question. So here's what happens. So for our budgets, here's what we do. And I'll sort of give you a little bit of insight to how we formulate these things. So we usually kind of start with where we finished the prior year, right? In a sense, you know, and again, I'm doing this in April, right? Because the school year is not ended, but we really have to have compliance-wise by end of June, a budget for the year. This budget is going to get revised again. I promise you that, right? But we usually start with, we know what the revenues are estimated based on our estimated number of students that we think we're going to have. So this is, you know, it's almost like we're predicting something and hopefully it comes to fruition, right? And this is where most schools go off the rails. We'll say, oh, we're going to have 500 students, right? First day of school shows up, we have 250, we're in big trouble, right? And so that's usually what happens here with our revenues. So we know potentially based on estimates what we may get, but until they show up, it's all pixie dust or fairy tales in that way. Down here, sort of flip that, right? Because really and truly your enrollment matches your expenditures down here in terms of staff, right? You're staff appropriately, right? And that's different for every school year over year, right?
I guess my question is budget, so we approve the budget or revise the budget based on, you know, the previous quarter, previous months.
We could do that every quarter, sort of take a look at this. And again, we know there are three, and to your point, we sort of do this, and this is the year that you will see this come to fruition a little bit more. As I mentioned in October, that's our first opportunity to do that because we'll file something called the first interim report. That interim report sort of gives us some look down the road, right? And if we say, hey, look, you know, I think we're trending lower or higher than expected, budget revision, right? So that's that place in time. We could literally revise this budget every single month or day if we wanted to. We can, you know, probably tie up this poor board's.
Delano and I do that the month.
Yeah, we do. You know, we check this and we were looking at it, but there's just certain places where, you know, once it, and again, you know, when we see last year's numbers, we know that that's the reasons for that are plain and simple. But this is the year, and I want to really hone in on this year, that we're going to be watching these numbers here with a very close eye because there's so much writing potentially. And I'll tell you this, when you go to your authorizer, one of the things that they want to check is, hey, look, where are we fiscally? Are we financially stable? Are we solvent, right? Because here's the last thing you want to do is give you a charter to go across the entire county and we run this thing into the ground, right? That's not a good look for any of them, you know, them and us, right? So to your point, David, yes, you know, the budget here in terms of the annual budget piece for this, you have salary schedule, things like that. So we're sort of locked in with some of those things. A couple of areas where it's a little bit slippery, and I'll tell you, program expenses, right? Program expenses are always hit and miss because from one year to the next, you know, and every year this happens. I guarantee you now, between now and June, Dr. Bean, there's going to be a couple of times we'll have conversations where the question becomes, hey, can we afford this thing? And I'll say, that's not in the budget, but let's try, right? And so sometimes the conversations that the board is not privy to are those conversations internally about, hey, how do we spend $1 twice, right? And, you know, and we try our best, obviously, to minimize some of those areas, but sometimes those needs are absolute must-haves, right? And sometimes they come up without us knowing, you know, there may be a new thing that we need to purchase. I'll give you an example. This year you added some new curriculum, right? I believe it was additional curriculum. Singapore Math is the one I'm thinking of. There was another one. Right? Yeah, thank you. Those are very expensive programs. One was in the budget, the other one wasn't, but it's a need that the school has, right? So we have to address that, right? But I could say, no, Dr. Bean, I want my numbers to look absolutely perfect over here. I don't want any problems out of you. But that doesn't give him the flexibility to provide the best education to these students. And that's what personally my compass is always on that, which is what can we do to make sure that, tell me your name, sweetie? Jada. There are some other kids sitting here, they're gone. What can we do to provide Jada with the best education possible that the school has to offer? And that is the challenge for all of us. You know, and obviously that's the directorate from this body, is to make sure that that happens. Not always cut and dry and as easy. If this was a private business, you know, we could sort of have a different conversation about budgeting and things like that and how we can control costs. But when we're looking to support 377 students, you know, we know that down here in the operational area, there are lots of things that, you know, come and go. Special education is another one. I can give an example of that. I imagine now your population has grown. In year one, we had very low sped costs. I know this because I did the actuals for it. Last year, it increased. This year is going to go up some more because I guarantee you will have more students now. And those are things that we can never, we can't plan for them because we never know what exactly is going to show up here on day one. And I promise you somewhere along the way, as we go down into the future with this, that will happen because we'll have our spend cases that will come up that will break us, right? Or have the potential for that. And as you know all too well, having been in schools that, hey, a student shows up with an IEP, you are bound to provide every single waking thing that's in that IEP, regardless of what it costs, right? And that's just the way education works. You know? I'm giving you a small example here of things that potentially will, you know, force our budget to go over the rails a little bit, things like that, right? While we hope it doesn't happen, but, you know, realistically they do happen, right? And I'll give you just another tidbit with the SPED program. Right now you get roughly $700 per ADA for special education. What you really need is about $3,000 per ADA, right? So just to kind of show you how far off that is. And then when you add in all the ancillary services, because it's not just what happens in the classroom, it's all the other ancillary services that comes along with that as well. So to your point, David, yes, year over year, month over month, quarterly, absolutely, right? And then this is why I want to hold this body here accountable to make sure that, hey, look, Dr. Bean and I, we can have all the conversations we want, but when we come here and report, we want to make sure that you guys are looking at this as well too, right? And that you guys are looking at these line items and go, hey, look, you know, we're concerned that we're spending too much money in the wrong places, right? And I can always say absolutely not, or yes, we are, and then that will be, you know, for Dr. Bean to account for, right? But I will leave you with this. On this note, this is only year 3. How many of you guys have ever started a business, have a business, worked it, right? When you get to year 5, you do your pulse check, right? I know this because I'm in year 5 right now, right? And I go, well, I know where I was year 1, year 2, year 3, right? And it's par for the course that you will do this. Right, you're riding away, right? Year 1, you may be down here. Year 2, you uptick a little bit. Then you reinvest back in the business again. And you go down here again, and you start up again, and you reinvest. So you're riding away for a while, unless you're in a high growth business. you know, that's just constantly revenues flowing in, but that's not always the case, right? So par for the course, look at this business this way. We're in year 3. We've survived the worst 2 years that we could have possibly had, and we're still here, right? So now it's what we do from this point going forward. That's going to tell the tale of success for us, right? Because I'll tell you when we get to next year, right? And I wish Dr. Bean had his thing up there again. And I'm so excited that we're going to do this. And I don't want to belabor this point much, but as we go into next year, this is going to be what get us there. It's going to be this year. We have to be solid, rock solid. We don't have a whole lot of room here in terms of net income, right? 183,000, right? But we can manage this budget in a way that says if we stick to the plan, trust the plan, we'll get there because we don't have much room for error going forward. I'll take questions. I'll show you the balance sheet really quickly while I'm doing that.
One of the basically reason for me to raise the questions. When we look at the budget, I think from a financial perspective, number one, you want to see kind of balance out, right? That's number one. Number two, you want to check, what areas is the main drivers, or revenue-wise and expense-wise. Right? I mean, there are a lot of details, and so we just focus on the key points. Number three, because each board meeting with a series, and at the end of the year, with a budget, it would be nice to see what's the delta, the change, and the key change, so the major change, and what's the end of the numbers, what are the end of the changes. That would be very nice to give the board a very good perspective of where we exceed our expectations, where we belong.
I'm going to give you 2 things on that next board meeting. And Dr. Mary Beth, you make a note of this as a reminder for me. All right, I'm going to give you 2 things. I'm going to give you one for 6/30/23, so that way we can see that. And then I'll start to give you one every month with this, because to your point, David, it's important for you guys to see what we see in terms of that, right? To answer your question directly here, and you can always bank on this. There's one area of the school that biggest driver in terms of our expenditures are our people, right? Our people is going to account for about 60% of the budget for the most part, right? And it goes up from there. The bigger the organization, usually that you'll see that. You pull up any school district in the county, they're about 75% of their budget goes to people. 25% is left for all of the other stuff, which is ridiculous in my opinion. But that's just the way. That's the economy, the scale there. Same thing here with us. We sort of look, and every month I'll point this out, but our personnel, really takes up quite a bit of our revenues, our expenditures. Right. And if you look at our books and supplies, you're a small amount, right? In that way. And then obviously our services and other operational costs here as well, too. Now, and keep this in mind, too, as well. In the first half of this year, the school year, that's when you'll see the biggest uptick in expenditures on the program side. By that, I mean, we're buying more classroom materials, we're buying more books, we're buying more programs, we're buying all of those things. And then they tend to flatten out as we go through the year. But to your point, Mary Beth, and remind me to do that next time, is to put in, because I have that, I just never included here, just where we can see that variance line by line, right? You can see where those changes are, whether we're trending normally, or sometimes it's just timing, because we can expense more in July and August versus what we'll do down the road. So we sort of have a wonky look this year. I mean, July, August, September, and then just sort of flattens out the rest of the year, depending on what those lines. I'm sorry. Balance sheet looks like this. As I mentioned, roughly 300,000 and change there. We have about 175,000 that we're due that we didn't get at the end of June. on the books there. We've got some prepaid expenditures. We booked some construction in progress here, and that's just, now check with Janice on why she booked this year, but I think this is, something that you guys are doing here with this, building. Where the rubber meets the road for us is down here. Accounts payable. Take a look at a couple of these lines. So this is what we're in with Charter Schools Capital already, right? About 820,000. That's a carryover from, you know, some from last year, obviously some from this year. You've already paid some of this back when you see all this financial. This is lower. I think it's down to about 510,000 or so, right? We have some unearned revenue here. You and I are going to address these with our plans, right? So this unearned revenue, 561,000. Technically, it's a liability here because we received the cash at some point in the past, but because they're highly restricted, we must expense them according to the guidelines for that. And until that happens, you know, this just sort of sits here as a liability. And obviously, we have some earned vacation time there as well. And then our charter school revolving loan, as you can see here, we've paid back 70-something thousand of that, and that continues for the next 3 years. Right, so our liabilities quite a bit, 1.8 million here. Look at our assets, only 593. Obviously, that puts us with a huge deficit here of 1.2 million. Question. Yes.
The unearned revenue, is that all government?
All of it. So I'll give you classic examples. There are a couple of pieces the governor doled out last year. He gave, I can't remember the exact numbers that this school took. Let's just say it was 400,000, right? They gave half of it December of last year, and then the other half of it in the spring. One of the requirements were, hey, we need to develop a plan. It has to be a plan that says you're going to do these things. Whether, hey, we're going to buy all red shoes for the students, whatever that may be. But until we bought those red shoes, guess what? Can't recognize those expenses. And we can't recognize the revenues that are tied to that.
So we already received them.
Yeah.
Are there any categories that we don't think we can expense?
No, it will all be spent.
Yeah.
It's timing of when, and I'll give you an idea. Example here, we'll have 4 years to spend that money, right, as an example. They're saying the art and music grant, you have until 2026 to spend that. The learning recovery one, you have until 2029, right? So it's, you know, they give you a long period of time to spend it, right? But we can't recognize that until those expenses actually incur those expenses. Right? And that means, you know, having a plan that says we're going to do this, this, and this. Right? So that's that. So then
And that plan is being, it's
Yeah.
creating that plan right now.
And this is usually part of the course with certain pieces of revenues that we get from the federal government or the state, that they're highly restricted in that way. So this is kind of where we are now, and I want you guys to focus on this deficit here, right, in terms of our fund balance. So this is sort of the net worth of the school at this moment. If this was a business, in the traditional sense of that, you know, would say, hey, look, guys, we need to change course immediately, right? But I've seen schools with double this here and turn things around, and I want you to trust me on that when I say that. In a school setting, and you can go to any school, pull their balance sheet, and if they're in year 3, year 2, they're looking like this. This is what it looks like, right? This is what growth looks like as well too, because now, you know, and then this is also what declining enrollment from year 1 to year 2 looks like in real life, right? And I try not to sugarcoat these things because I want you guys to recognize that, yeah, are we in difficult times a little bit here? Absolutely, right? Can we pull ourselves out of this? Oh, yes, absolutely, right? And nothing is impossible when it comes to making a great school, right? It takes time. If you guys are invested in this long term, you know, young lady, what grade are you in? 7th grade. If you guys are invested in this long term, by the time she gets in the 9th grade, this is not what we'll see. That's not what we'll see.
We're gonna have a different conversation a year from now because we will be caught up with the revenue lag. So we'll certainly have a different conversation a year from now. But also that red is because schools have a lot of expenses at the beginning of the school year and the revenue hasn't caught up. So
What is a cash account by other location resource?
Oh, so that, well, let me go back to that. So basically what happens is that, so if you see on there, you notice we categorize everything as restricted and unrestricted. So it's just a movement of the cash in between those two accounts. And if you notice, it will net to 0 in the total column over there. If you want me to go back, I'll show it to you. But it's just the treatment of how we account for it, because this is fund accounting. And so what we'll have to do is say, hey, look, let's just say we had a line item for some restricted program or whatever. And because on the balance sheet, it's only going to show, hey, we spent, when it comes out of your cash, it's not going to say, hey, I don't care where you take it from, it's cash, right? But when we classify it, we have to then have that journal entry to show the movement between the unrestricted cash and the restricted expenses. That's why you're seeing that movement. Let's go back.
which makes school financing a lot different than regular corporate financing. Because you have lots of restricted revenue, unrestricted, and that money goes back and forth. So it's a lot more complicated.
And as you're speaking about this line here, right? Yeah, you see it? So it here, movement of cash in between here, that's to 0 there. So it's a 0 effect. It's just how we have to account for it. And what it does, it sort of gives the wrong impression on the balance sheet, but it's a necessary to have this here for fund accounting. Because what happens when you get down here, David, it impacts these.
Yeah, so the end result is you add 2 columns, I see that. But basically the 2 columns will cancel. You add them together, right?
Yes, so it nets to 0. 0 impact to the balance sheet, but necessary for us when we come down here to these. If you notice, we have several balance sheet accounts. You have your unrestricted net position, you have your restricted net position here as well. We always have to make sure that because of this cash that's moving, as an example, if I had $100 in my left pocket and $150 in my right pocket, I have to know how much of that is restricted, how much is unrestricted, and when I pay something, I have to know which bucket it's coming out of. But this is just a washout of that. Right? But at the end of the year, we're making these adjustments down here to make sure that at all times we know what the fund balance is for your unrestricted position and your restricted net position. Even though those are negative now, I promise you, when we turn this thing around and this thing is, not a deficit anymore, you'll see that it's, it won't be red. Obviously, it'll be a different color here, but these will be positive. And your restricted net position is always, we want to make sure that's always zeroed out. To be quite honest with you, at the end of the year, technically, what should happen here, you get $100 in restricted funding, you have $100 in restricted expenditures, right? That's usually how this washes out. But because, as I said, if you look here, right, we have $561,000 in restricted unearned revenues, right? It's not washing out, right? Because we haven't spent that. So that's also part of this, what you're seeing here with this. Check register. I don't go into much details on the check register. You guys have it. Feel free to ask any questions. If you have any expenses here. sort of scroll through it. $357,000 in expenditures through July. Again, you can see here most of that. I look at this here, you can see a lot of these things are related to onset of the school year. Paid our, see here, we paid our audit fees. Like we had some special ed reimbursements, quite a bit of things happening here. Credit card payments. This is August, I should say, not July. All right, those are our financials through July. I'm going to show you a little bit of the unaudited actuals. And how many of us remember how many of us were here last year? This is the same report that we filed last year. It's a compliance report at the end of the year. It summarizes the financial statement that covers July 1 to June 30th. The certification page is important because we're attesting to the accuracy of these financials, right? This has already been delivered to Orange County Department of Ed, your authorizer. It's due on the 15th of each, September 15th of each year. This report covers, and again, as you guys can see here, we'll go back to restricted, unrestricted. So everything that we do sort of falls into those categories, right? I'll give you the balances over here. And again, paying attention to the various revenue streams that we have, because I think it's important for the board to get connected to the funding sources, right? And that's important because your challenge, I should say your challenges, but there are restrictions on those funding sources, right? Anything in this column here, the unrestricted column, lots of flexibility to some degree. Over here, not so much flexibility to a large degree, right? You know, as an example, child nutrition, this is related for your lunch program. You can't spend this on anything else but lunch program, right? You can't buy books or anything like that and charge it there. No. Our LCFF, 2.2 million. And again, this is based on 210 ADA, Mary Beth, from 23 in June, right? Federal dollars, 258,000. Again, you can see where those are in terms of the line items. One of the things that you don't get, just because of your demographics, you don't get much of title funding here, zero, right? But you do get, this is your PCSGP grant, this is your nutrition, and this is your special ed. Remember, as I mentioned, if you look at these special ed dollars, what are you going to do with $21,000 in federal special ed dollars? Not a whole lot, right? One of the things about this report that it does not do, it doesn't give you any comparisons to your budget or anything like that, right? Because your authorizer or the state is only concerned about one thing. Did we account for all the revenues correctly? And did we account for all the expenditures, right? Your audit will sort of do the same as well, right? Bottom line here, our total revenues was 3.5 million. When next time we meet, I will show you what our revenues have been year by year for the last 30 years, so you guys can see. Year one, lots of revenues. Year two, which is this year, went this way because of the enrollment situation, right? But here's the challenge: 1.5 million in salaries for your staff. And again, at some point, if you guys recall, we had budgeted to have almost 400 students last year. And then that was almost cut in half, right? So then we had to revise the budget to adjust for that. But some of these people stayed because it was necessary, right? So sometimes you can get into a place where if you staff for enrollment, and I always make this case to my clients and they'll say, no, we can't do it that way. I'll say, hey, if you have 100 students, that's 4 teachers in my book. But in reality, it's probably 6, right? You know, because, you know, in here you have a unique program where you must have specific teachers. And this is always the case when you have a specialty program such as this. If this was your traditional brick and mortar where you can teach anything special or didn't provide anything special, you know, this would look different. But you have an immersion program, so you have to be strategic. You have specific teachers and staff that are needed for that to come to life and come to fruition, right? And then obviously the support in the classroom is the same as well here, right? $639,000. Benefits of various sorts, as you can see here, right? Our retirement system for your teachers, $297,000. Again, that's 19% of every dollar that we pay. Total benefits, $566,000. This is where the investment goes, $423,000 in program supplies, right? Another $1.2 million in operational costs. And again, that's a little bit misleading, right? To some degree, because when I say operational, there are things in here as well, too, like in this line item here, right? All of your after-school program is captured in here because that's not done in-house. That's done by what's our dear friends at Strategic Kids. Thank you, Strategic Kids. This is done by Strategic Kids. Our lease, as you can see here. One of the things that I wish, and this will come up when we talk about next year and having not a Prop 39 facility, but if we were to engage with a private landlord, we're able to recoup 75% of our lease costs. Right? We can't do that now because we're in Prop 39 facility. And they say rent free. Thank you. If this is rent free, I don't know what rent free is, right? But this is the cost for those additional classrooms and all these other things, right? And I imagine next year, if you try to grow here, they'll put the kibosh on that and say, well, you only have X amount of classrooms available, right? Communication, not a whole lot. Again, 1.2 million there. This is what it cost us last year to borrow money from Charter Schools Capital. Our total expenses, 4.5 million. Our revenues were 2.5. Somebody wrote that down? Someone wrote that down? 2.5, right? I highlight this because, you know, there's our deficit, $1 million for the year, right? So again, this is where, as I mentioned, year one, this is, I don't like, I personally, I'm giving you my opinion on something here, it doesn't matter one way. I personally don't like the way that they fund schools this way, right? Because they punish you when enrollment dips, right? In the worst way, because now you incur, you know, more debt than you realistically have because of just how funding works with that. And it will catch up to us, obviously, right? We'll be okay, right? It just takes, the run out just takes time, right? I'll give you an example of something that takes even longer than this. as we go down here, this now becomes the balance sheet, right? So if you look, starting here, so this is our profit and loss statement up there showing that million in net loss, right? Then down here, this becomes our balance sheet, right? So this is taking into consideration where we were last year, right? So at the end of last year, our fund balance was this, 1.98 million, so 198,000. So if you take a snapshot on July 1, this is where we were of 2022, right? This is where we are now. You take that plus this, gives you this, right? That's where we are, right? Pretty simple. Everyone following along? It's not necessarily engineering or some of the complicated thing, but nonetheless, just want to make sure you guys are following along, right? So that's where we finished the year. When you see your audit, this will be the number that shows there, and it says, "Hey guys, you guys should be mindful of what's going on here. You know, what's the plan?" And your authorizer will do the same thing. Because I guarantee you, in about another week or two, maybe a month, Dr. B, you're going to get a nice letter from your authorizer. I say nice, being facetious. They'll say, "Hey guys, we're concerned you have a deficit of fund balance." I imagine that letter is something that they've had for like 30 years because they just change the name on it and send it out, right? Nothing even here for you guys because we don't, we don't do accrual, modified accrual basis. This is our balance sheet. As I mentioned, our cash position there, right? 243,000 at the end of June in terms of receivables or things that were due. But as I mentioned in July, so we got some of it in July a little bit here because it was 243 in June. It's 150 something in July. Again, here, same thing with our prepaid. It's not 20,000, it's 33 there. 700,000 in terms of our net assets. I'm going to touch on something when I'm done with this. See our liabilities here again. 1.5 million in liabilities. But again, our ending fund balance here, 823,000. The rest of this is just basically the maintenance of effort to make sure that we're spending. There's a little thing with government that they want to make sure that you're spending all of your money for some strange reason. I don't understand why they have this here, but basically what they're saying is, hey, look, year over year, they want to make sure that we're not hoarding money. And then that's kind of the way they look at it. They don't want us to dig ourselves out of this hole that we've gotten ourselves into, right? We will say ourselves into because that's what we mean collectively. They want to make sure that year over year that you're meeting something called maintenance of effort. So they're going to look at this and go, oh, have you met those standards? And if, in year over year, your authorizer will let you pass 1 or 2 years without that, right? Because they know, hey, we're trying to recover here. We're trying to get ourselves on solid footing. But years 3 and 4, what they want to see is that we're spending to the same tune that we spent the prior year and the year before that, the year before that, right? Because essentially the spirit of this, what they're saying is that, hey, look, you should be investing in the students, into the program, not empire building. So that will become a thing, and when it becomes a thing, we can address it, right? And I'd rather have that conversation than this conversation about how do we get ourselves right. Here are the challenges for us. And if there are no questions on this, I'll leave you guys with a couple of things, right? Worry not. And trust me when I tell you that, because I've been down this road before with plenty of experience in terms of this is not the first school that started out great, hit a pitfall or a roadblock, and it's had to recover. You guys are very intelligent. There's a lot of diversity in thought and mindset on this board. We can get creative, right? Dr. Bean will bring things forward that's going to say, hey, this is how we're going to move forward. I will usually sign off on those things unless I say, that's the worst plan in the world, Dr. Bean, let's not do that, right? A couple of things that you guys can do though, right? We can mitigate certain things that, in terms of, as an example, we have legal expenses from the last couple of years, right? Worst way. This board has made a promise. We're not going to ever have that again, right? And this is not a lecture. This is just, thank you. I completely forgot about this thing. I'm so sorry. We're going to get to a place where that's not going to be an issue, right? Because if I were to pull the curtain back on just that particular thing, right, we can sort of see, right, lots of resources walked out the door. My concern with that is that we don't want to repeat those things because we have to, this is a year, like I said, that, we really want to get this organization back on solid footing like year one, right? The challenge for you guys is to make sure that your leadership and your guidance leads to positive outcomes to where those things are not an issue. For being the challenge for you is to make sure that you're working with us and your team to make sure that we're doing things that will produce the positive outcomes that your organizer will love, that your community, the parents and all those will appreciate. Those are not easy things, right? And so I'm taking a little bit more time today just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Because I literally wake up every morning with how can we make this go in the way that it should, right? And that's what you guys pay for. You pay for advice that sometimes it's a little bit salty, that may not be the best in terms of, hey, look, but I would be doing you a disservice if I just said, oh, just continue to do things the way you're doing and you'll be fine. No, we have to change, right? Because the evidence says here, we have an opportunity, but if we make the same mistake twice, your authorizer will be over here and they will be doing all sorts of other things to make sure that this organization either goes away or becomes viable again, right? So I will leave you with that. Not good news here for last year, but we can't change the past, but we certainly have some hand in what the future holds, right? And so I will leave you with that. Any questions that you guys have? If anyone wants to talk to me offline, David, I would love to sort of pick your brain on some of the things that you would like to see that, because I think you will help your colleagues in the best way when you and I can sort of flesh out some of those things. I always welcome that. Felipe, same thing as well, right? Yes, sir. Any questions for you, Dr. B?
No.
We're good. This has already been filed. You're just going to vote on approving something that we've already turned in.
Thank you, Delano, for taking the time and sharing with us. And we'll look forward to some year-over-year, reviews and I think until profitability will follow the enrollment. It's pretty simple. Yes. And then, like you said, change in leadership had a cost to us, but we have a really great year in the rearview mirror and a great year ahead. So thank you for that.
Can I mention one other thing? And I didn't say this earlier, but I always like to make sure I give credit where credit is due. These two folks right here, I can't say enough about what he walked into, what Mary Beth has had to, somewhat endure in terms of, making this game. These are your two biggest assets. Outside of the folks in the classroom doing, I cannot say enough about what they have done to bring stability, calm, presence to this place. It's invaluable. I'm sorry.
I'm the third.
Oh yeah. You're looking for some credit too. But I always want to leave that as a thing for these two because I know how hard they work, and I see it every day. And I just want you guys to know, from me, that's there. Right. So thank you guys, and I really appreciate what you guys do here. Really
Thank you. Mary Beth, do you remember what our ending enrollment was year one?
I'm sorry, 307.
Yeah. So just put in perspective for everybody, at 370 students in our first year, we actually had positive net revenue about $198,000. That's unheard of in a charter. You never have positive revenue the first year. Again, I don't know how to think of one. I don't think one exists, but we did. That was a little bit of an anomaly. But because our enrollment dropped down roughly 100 students, we incurred $1 million loss. Balanced out with that 198, we carry about an $800,000 loss. With 376 students, we're going to eliminate a great percentage of that, and if we have some outside funding, we'll be back to net zero and building revenues. And we'll let the charter in future years chide us for holding on to too much revenue over our plans for the future. So very good. Thank you, Delano, too. That brings us then to Roman numeral 6, just one consent agenda item, and that's the approval of our board minutes from the prior meeting. Could I ask for a motion to approve the prior board minutes? Okay. Thank you. In a second, please.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. We'll just do a quick roll call vote. Miller, do we still have you online?
No.
Okay, he dropped off. I figured he would for that. And we'll just go ahead and go down the line then. Molly, approve the minutes?
Yes.
Doug is a yes as well. And Brett? Aye. And David? Aye. And Felipe?
Aye.
Great. That takes us then to our discussion and action items. There's 4 of them. We've had a little bit of discussion, but we'll open it up again. The motion will be the board will discuss and consider action on the resolutions for the sale of additional receivables to Charter Schools Capital. Frame that up a little bit. If Delano wants to chime in, he can. When we say we'll sell receivables, this means we're borrowing money temporarily to keep our cash flow where it needs to be. But technically what we're doing is we're selling future revenue that will come in to our lender. So that's why it's stated a little bit strange. You've probably never heard in a commercial environment like that, unless you've ever sold future revenues. So it's borrowing. And so periodically we need to approve the borrowing that's ahead and predicted. And we get it from Charter Schools Capital. I end up signing it just as we need it each time, but we have to be ahead of time approving it as a board. Would you add anything, Delano, from your perspective?
No, I think you said it precisely. This is a bridge, if you will. As I mentioned, when we look at the cycle of funding and the timing of funding, the first 4 or 5 months of the school year, they're almost dry in a sense. But the expenditures obviously are consistent and grow over that time. So we need something to backfill that. And in this case, this is where our capital partners, Charter Schools Capital, who have been with us since inception in providing this type of support, comes in handy. So that's the reason why we're asking to approve this round of funding. And then that will carry through until we get to a place where this runs out. And if we need to go back, then we'll bring it back.
You got some thoughts. Yeah. The question is, I understand the rationale for doing this. The question is, do you plan a portion that a percentage of future revenue, right? Use that as a collateral.
Yeah. So as an example, they will take a look at our entire funding for the year, and then they'll say, well, we'll purchase November in lieu of taxes. Let's just say November in lieu of taxes is $100,000. They'll purchase 80% of that amount. All right, so they'll purchase $80,000 worth of that, and then the fees and their discounts are all obviously tied to the timing between when we borrow it, when it's due, when we pay it back. That's when we'll have those interest and the discount fees that will.
So you basically pledge that as a collateral.
Yes.
A percentage of a specific time frame.
Yes.
With condition.
Yes, absolutely.
So once we receive the revenue, we will pay back.
Yes. Yes, and it's
Principal plus interest.
you got it. I hate to use this term, but it's almost like a glorified payday loan,
right?
In a sense,
Yeah.
I'll pay you later, you loan me today.
Yes, because when a sell receivable, in business, when you sell, you're not going to get back.
Right.
You basically sell the future potential.
And for our authorizer purposes, and because in traditional school setting, to your point, you're not selling it. You can't sell it.
Exactly. You basically pledge a collateral.
Exactly. So it's basically just a collateral loan against future earnings.
I would suggest that to kind of make it specific, just number one, it's a specific time frame. It's not any of the future unlimited. part of that, right?
Say it again.
If you pledge a part of the future
Yes,
projected
yes.
revenue
Mhm,
with a discount
mhm.
and to the bank.
Yes. So it's next time you will see, and I believe in that packet, there is it shows the schedule of what we're selling.
Are they gonna, use a percentage, basically, probability of success adjusted?
What they do is they say, as an example, that going back to the $100,000. So the timing of when they give it to us versus the timing of when it's due. So that time in between, that's when you're gonna see that accrued interest comes into play. So the longer out you sell, which is why we have to be so careful. The longer out, if I sell something that's in March, and they give it, could you imagine what it will cost us, right? So we have to be, we're boxed into like a 3-month time frame. I don't like to go any further than that. And then in 3 months, we'll go to the next 3 months. So there's a little bit of strategic planning with that, but I can't do it long term for like say 6 months to a year. We have to just take it in those increments of time.
So so it comes up we did this very recently. Did we just do this about 2-3 months ago? Yeah, because
So we're right about
I
that
think it's
same time.
foolhardy to go out, 6, 8, 9 months. You're paid for, first of all, in interest. But Delano, from the very beginning, even year one, when we did our first Charter Schools capital borrowing, same thing. And surprisingly, we paid it back much quicker than we thought. And so that's a discipline that we will maintain.
And I'll leave you with this, the way out of the borrowing is through growth, right? Because obviously we need more revenues, right? And the way out of that is enrollment growth, right? That's really the only way. So you have to be extremely strategic about how far into this relationship we go and, our own long-term plans for growth, et cetera, et cetera. And all of this, you'll see more of this as we get into next year with this particular strategic plan that's being discussed now, because we will certainly have to go back to them to fund quite a bit of that expansion as well, too.
Other questions or observations prior to asking for a motion? Any other thoughts? It's also in our board packet, the resolution that ultimately I end up signing. I think this one actually the secretary just provides with our votes. I sign the actual document. I'll make a motion then if we take action on the resolution for the sale of additional receivables to Charter Schools Capital. Second, Brett. And we'll do a roll call vote starting with Molly.
Yes.
And Doug is a yes. Brett, aye. And David?
Yeah.
And we vote.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Moves to item B, which Delano already set up for us. And it's the board that would approve the 2022, 2023 unaudited actuals. I'm going to read it all because I think we're supposed to read all of this. For the period of July 1, 2022 to June 30th, 2023, the submission of Charter Schools financial data to CDE, the California Department of Education, which is required by the Ed Code 1628 and Ed Code Section 42100, as amended by Assembly Bill 1994. Charter schools must submit the complete forms for their authorizing agents by September 15th, 2022, which we have.
Check that. That should be 2023.
Yeah, that is right.
Typo.
Correct that, 2023. We'll note that, Mary Beth, just in the minutes. And it's been provided to our oversight board, which is nice. So I'll ask for a motion then to approve our actions as submitted.
I motion.
And a second?
Yeah.
Thank you, David. And we'll go left to right. Molly?
Yes.
And I approve as well. Brett? Aye. And David? Thank you.
Yes.
And thank you again, Delano, to North Compass for all of your accounting work and preparation there. This will be kind of fun from the executive director report. By the way, Mary Beth, I should pause at each of these and ask if there's public comment, but I don't believe there is because normally you flag me, so I'll just triple check that. C is the board is to discuss and approve forming an ad hoc committee to support the executive director in this countywide charter process. And I think we talked about that even in prior board meetings, but any other discussion, even if it's just emotional response to what lies ahead?
Let me just some comments. I think I understand the rationale of changing the charter and also for the proposed name change, all that. Yeah, I do have some even concern about the expanding this school in the third year, and we're basically operating right now. So deficit. So normally, if you expand it, that's like a business. You expand it into new territories. You want to make sure your main business is in strong footing. Then you start the expansion. I support the executive director's vision, long-term vision. I think it's great. I feel very optimistic and enthusiastic in supporting the long-term vision. However, I'm also concerned about expanding very quickly, especially when it demands resources or dilute our focus from RLA. And because currently, I would ask where we can come up with the resource, human resource, as well as the financial resource necessary to support expansion into Santa Ana and into Tucson. I think that would be a great idea to have add a middle school and even high school down the road to build this. But in the meantime, whether it makes sense to start the process this year, or you can do it the next year sometime. Once we
Just
are
clarify that there won't be any new schools until 2 years.
Yeah, I see that. Because that's a 2, 4, 2, 4, 5. Okay, because next year you're gonna add 2 more, right? 2 more, and third year add another one. So we're gonna have 5 schools 2 years from now. And I understand. Yeah, we're gonna have to make a long-term plan. So we can come to that point where you can have the resource. So that's a question.
It's well stated, exactly what was on my mind as well. So I understand the reason we have a current deficit, but on the other hand, almost all of the revenue we do have for the school, I want to stay in there. And so if the expense to launch the Endeavor is too great, if it's a couple $100,000 from operating revenue here, it's probably too much. 10, 20,000 just to seed it so that we could get an outside third-party fundraising operation going, which then for sure, because that won't take away from this school site's operating resources. So same kind of thing. I think that's it. If I could rewind history and restart this endeavor over, I probably wouldn't start until it had $250,000 in the bank from somebody donating it. We were betting on the come, and it worked. But boy, if I was going to do it again, and so I think when you lay down that idea of a third party that would be able to bring in money for developing the future schools, that's the key. We don't bring too much money out of operating here. 10, 20,000, I don't think we would miss it, wouldn't impact operations at all, wouldn't hurt the education level at all. A couple $100,000, we're going to feel a pinch, because we're going to be about a $5 million operation this year here. 10, 20,000 to start what's in the future, not problematic. A couple $100,000, we're going to feel it because we're already, selling our receivables. So great observation. And I think we get reflection along the way at every stage with Dr. Bean, and by having a committee, where we can look at it and say, a middle school here versus a middle school at another site, let's weigh it out.
Is somebody else willing to contribute to that, make that happen? Fantastic. Do we have to bear the cost internally? Then we wait out and say, let's try to get one more classroom here, even though it'd be ideal to have a middle school at its own site, because middle school does need some different ways to operate. So other thoughts, continue those steps.
I have another point, if you may.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Dean, so when we, change the name of the corporation, so basically your long-term vision is using this company as a group company, right? Basically the holding company, when you open different schools. So are you gonna financially are you gonna consolidate the financials into one company? Or each school have a independent budget?
Oh, it's one consolidated, money goes into, just like it does now, the nonprofit organization.
Right.
And then if we have multiple campuses, you set up budgets for multiple campuses, but it still flows into the one
So
organization.
they're gonna be consolidated into the one holding company. So
That's right.
that being said, okay, so whenever we open, because we are 3 years into business. Okay, then the asset, the $1.22 million negative. The revenue, okay, net income is going to be negative 1 point something million, okay, right? Projected. So 3 years into business, we are negative on the net asset and the net income on both sides. And especially on the cash flow, we're going to be cash flow negative. My question is, okay, if we're going to consolidate into one holding company, how are we going to support simultaneously and open up several subsidiaries? Like subsidiaries.
Can I add a little clarity to David's point, because it's important. So it essentially will form a CMO, right? So it'll be a management that will oversee all of these schools. Now, depending on how the schools are formed, right? So you'll have the parent company, everything sort of rolls up to that. Each one of those schools, to your point, will be generating its own revenues in a sense, but then internally those expenditures are shared, right? Because since this is one entity, you can have shared employees across the entire organization. So in essence, that somewhat reduces some of those costs, right? Because these are not all standalone. So you could essentially take the revenues of one school to support the other school, right? In that sense. So it's when it's built all the way out. And I'm not saying in a perfect world, that's what it will look like.
Revenue being shared when you have a positive cash flow.
Yes.
If you don't have a positive cash flow, you're not going to be able to share.
I think your position is correct. If we were to say we're opening a new school next fall. No, we wouldn't. That's why this plan is in 2 years, we're opening up a school. Because by the time January, February hits around, now the cash flow is rolling in because the enrollment is high. And then we're going to sustain another year of high enrollment, which would then allow us to open up this other school in 2 years. So, so to your point, we're not really pouring that much resources into writing a countywide charter. It's just a legal fee. We're not going to incur any facilities costs or staffing costs, because the first step is actually getting the countywide charter approved. Then we can, in the countywide charter, we would present you the financials for the countywide charter. OCDE won't approve it unless we have those 5-year financials. So we're not spending a lot. We're not going to be spending much in the first couple of years. Now, when we get into when we open in 2 years at possible elementary school, yeah, that's when we're going to be starting to incur certainly a lot of money to staff, to find the facility, things like that. But right now, if we wait to hire principal until, let's say, February, March, that's doable. All right. Then the only real cost is paying Young Mini to write this countywide charter, forming or changing the corporate name, and doing this foundation, articles of incorporation. I can do that online for $200, right?
Don't let anybody know that, because I do corporate formation as an attorney, and I charge a lot.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I'm just saying, you can really do it $300. So put all that together, that is the only resources needed to actually get this countywide charter going and then to start up, because we already have this school, which will be reopening in the fall of next year.
So what would probably be helpful is some estimated costs.
Right. Well, if we look at exactly, and if we look at the motion though, it's about forming this ad hoc committee to present to the board these costs, or there's 5-year plan financially. Yeah. So, no, we're not approving anything here. We're just approving an ad hoc committee to begin the process, and then B, a change in name. And that's it. So I just want to make clear what is being after tonight.
I think the path, we're starting down this path, probably.
Well, if they have an ad hoc committee, I understand. If the ad hoc committee gets together and decides a little too aggressive for a 2-year plan, maybe you make it a 3rd-year plan, then that's what the committee's decision is that we bring forward to the board. But that shouldn't stop us from writing a countywide charter and getting that approved. Because when you approve a countywide charter, you don't have to open up new schools right away. The first school we're opening up is already a school that is in existence, Irvine International. So I mean, yeah.
Other thoughts, Colleen, any thoughts?
Right, yeah, you don't have to open right away when the charter is approved. You can certainly, well, the first charter is going to be open, that's Irvine International.
This already exists.
But the next one, you don't have to open right away. In fact, you have 5 years to open, another charter. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. I think that's important. I don't feel like it's rushing. We have to jump into it. I guess I'm more concerned about personnel.
Yeah.
When we're doing so well, with you, Dr. Bean, and I know you said we can wait till February, but it's still only a couple months away.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about it. It's, because we just started putting everything in the place, and people, you trust you now right now. More suddenly a person coming in, and in the later part of the school year, there's a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
Having a new person, I'm not sure about that part. And that's
So-
what we're talking about here.
So, yeah. So make sure the ad hoc committee hears that, whoever is on there
Yeah.
hears that. So as we meet together in committee, we can decide that or not. The ad hoc committee, decide whether we put a principal in there or not. So tonight, the board, remember, we have to stick with the agenda. The board is not deciding on these decisions. The board is deciding on creating an ad hoc. And I do appreciate your both of your input, because that's going to weigh into the discernment of the 2 individuals that will be on the ad hoc committee. Yeah. So we just need 2, because you can't do more than 2. Otherwise you have a quorum.
Right. So, this is the tension to manage as leaders who have a responsibility. We have a really great thing in the school. I mean, it's a really great school, and to see it replicated it's a bigger vision than maybe individually we signed up for. Let's let the ad hoc committee inform us.
I'll be honest, I signed up for this job to expand. I did not sign up this job to run a school. Just make that very clear.
Yeah, and it's the vision. It has now been proven out. The test scores, the joy of the students, the school works. It works really well. Now it's investigating. Can we expand it to some other applications and offer it to some others too? So that's very good. What else? Any other thoughts on this before we? I think we had in mind an ad hoc committee already in the previous board meeting. This one now just says, yeah, we're going to form that ad hoc committee.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts before?
Because that ad hoc committee is going to be reporting every board meeting. And so you guys can then have a discussion with the ad hoc committee.
Well, the foundation, very exciting to me. I would love to have had a foundation way before we got started.
Yeah.
And there are individuals and organizations that want to fund educational endeavors through a foundation.
Right.
As opposed to even directly with their individual schools. That's really important mechanism. Well, let me make a motion then on C that we approve an ad hoc committee to support the executive director in this countywide charter process. And Molly is a second. We'll go for a vote from left to right. Molly?
Yes.
And I guess, and Brett? And David?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Fantastic. And then Dr. Bean, we have the same two that seem to have an affinity, Brett and Felipe.
Yeah.
Start on that. Could change up in with availability and interest at any point, but you both willing to start out on that? Sure. Sure, as well.
If Dr. Bean will.
Of course. Of course. And remember, the individuals can certainly talk individually about like concerns you would have, Molly, about principal being named or whatever. Talk individually, but never as a group.
Yeah, an unofficial board meeting.
Yeah.
Outside of the board meeting, right? Perfect. Item B is the discussion and approval of the name change of the corporation. And again, as David observed, the school does business as Irvine International Academy. We will continue to do that. We originally formed the corporation as Western Mandarin Immersion Charter School. And so we're asking that we would change that then to Orange County International Academies will be the overall corporation that schools still do business as. Any discussion on that? Personally, I'll just reflect on I love having, I like the previous one, but I like having the word Orange County in this. Orange County is well thought of throughout the entire state. But here's some other thoughts on it, positive, negative.
Well, I have comments. Kind of in general, so it kind of goes back to the overall point. So I don't have a problem with changing the name here, but this, I see your concern there because it's a pretty ambitious plan considering our crazy state, right? But as I see it, as we do this plan, at least from the very beginning, still aligns with the vision that is Irvine International, right? At the very beginning, the first couple of years, we're just expanding really the Irvine International Academy, right? We're looking at the middle school and potentially the high school, right? And I really support that portion of it. You know, I have a big commitment to that, and you know why, right? And so I think in a way, we owe it to our students to do that, right? Because here we're taking them through elementary school, right? And where do they go after that, right? The way that vision, we have to create that high school for that. Really, really support that. And I believe for there to open other campuses, the funding, or at least the budget, right, has to be there. And some of it, you know, has to be positive. I'm going to say currently we're not, we're a little bit red here. And I believe that incentive to make the budget positive keeps Dr. Bean going. You know, I think you really have an incentive there. If you're going to open those other campuses, the budget, the current, what do we call it? The Orange County,
Of course.
you know, Orange County International Academy, that budget's really got to stay positive, right? And I think that's a huge incentive for you to keep going for us, and that benefits us, you know, the school in general. So I'm very
positive on this whole thing. I know it's gonna be tough, that we're starting from a negative of almost 800,000, is it 800 or 1.2 million today? But as Delano says, as we go down to December, January, February, that number's not gonna look as bad. Right, we're gonna start getting our revenue back then, that kind of thing. I think you're gonna get a better feel for where the school really is at, not until December.
Yeah, just
Am I
remember,
understand that correctly, Delano?
Be a little bit further down in terms of, so,
Maybe January?
so if you look at things, on our total budget, remember that, you know, our revenues are only true as of April, right? So that's when the final adjustments are made. So it's really that far down the road, right?
And in that time frame, it's like March, Dr. Lee, March, what's happening in March with the Dr. Lee land expansion plan?
Yeah, I believe we're submitting in, according to the timeline for this,
Right.
he's submitting December,
December.
right? It takes roughly 2 months for that process to get worked out in terms of approval. So now we're looking at February, March-ish, right, in
But
there.
still, that's still focused on IIA.
That's all I,
That's all IIA, right?
and remember, we're maxed at capacity here. And remember what Delano said, the only way you can increase revenue is through increasing enrollment. So we can't increase enrollment unless we move our middle school. And I won't even say middle school, I'll say 6th, 7th, and 8th grade to another location that we could expand.
Then expand even more, right? We're just gonna continuously expand. I'm gonna call high school.
Right.
And grades, right? And so those things aren't happening until
Yes.
later next year, right? And even farther.
That's right. That's right.
And so I know our budget looks a little dicey, is that a good word? Not where we want to be, but I've learned from a couple of years that I've been around Delano is not to look at the July budget. Not to look till later, because everything's kind of in the flow, right? So I believe two positive things. Like, I believe that this expansion aligns with our commitment to the students we have now. We have to provide a path for them, right? And that path goes into middle school and high school, as far as I'm
So
concerned.
we talk about the expansion, two dimensions. The one is the expansion of this around the IIA.
Then the next step,
Then, you know, we're talking about, what we really,
That's
concerns
two
are
years
bigger,
right?
beyond the bigger, I support the growth of IIAs. Don't
Happen between December.
I am glad that we're thinking on the same line, expand. So we're gonna have a middle school, high school, these three.
But the next school.
But
next
the
one-
next school, you know, expanding into Santa Ana or Tuscan, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but that one won't be for 2 years. 2 years, right? 2 years. So that's 2 years away. As long as we continue on a positive growth.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, you don't want to expand the land. Yes, the expense of the current school.
I understand, but we still have 2 years to.
Yeah, because, you know, we see what's happening, 3 years with student that rent. And you can't use the resource or bring the resource of this school and to support another one is starting in the rent for another 3 years.
I understand.
That's if we're opening up a new school this fall, coming up, or we're not.
Yeah, I mean, once we expand it here, I mean, you know, this school is gonna be a solid footing, right? I have no question about it. I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, you know, we share this. You know, don't mistake.
Yeah.
But it's really kind of expanding, you take a different direction. I understand what you're trying to do. Yeah. So really into the different program that's.
I think it's a bigger step.
Yeah.
It's a much big step. It's a bigger step, but that big step is 2 years away.
Yeah. I mean, if this committee finds out, you know, in a year, or this team finds out in a year that we shouldn't open up Santa Ana or wherever in the year after, then we don't have to. But just keep in mind that it does take about a year to wrap up.
I would think that we have at least a year to look at, to decide.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you have a
We have
year
at
right
least
now.
a year.
So
Yeah.
we shouldn't really be looking at the budget that's July. We should
Right.
be thinking that it's gonna improve,
Right.
you know, come April, March, that's what he's saying.
By this time next year, you should be able to make a decision on whether you want to move forward with another school the next year. Yeah.
So approving the name change, to me, is the first step of that, right? And I think it sends a very positive signal to our students, the current students, that we're moving forward. I'm all for it.
The one question, this is, people see this school through the lens of Irvine International Academy, and they associate with it all that happens. It's a Mandarin English immersion school with lots of field trips and activities and special learning, all that. So that's the average person that attends here, they don't know what Western Manchester is. That's not the doorway they come through. It's our naming convention for us. And so I do think this Orange County International Academies will play well with our authorization, because it ties closely there, Orange County, and have this whole jurisdiction over all of Orange County. So I think we'll play well with them. And it does give us flexibility where we're not per se locked into only English and Mandarin. If we did see a school that we thought might be a different set of languages. So I think I didn't see it coming, but I'm not opposed to it. I think it has some benefit. Anybody have any reservations about it? Yeah, and it's not a whole lot of money to change a corporate name. When we talk about branding, it's not like we're going to change 50 logos or anything, or a whole franchise of logos. We have the reservations that arise just on name change. That's right. It's good. I'll move then that we make the change of the corporation from Western Mandarin Immersion Charter School at Orange County International Academies. Ask for a second. Second, Brett, second. Vote from left to right. Molly, is you?
Yes.
And Doug is a yes. Brett? And David?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Beautiful. Brings us to item number 7, which is this closing item. And we'll do it round robin style, giving each board member a chance to either comment for our executive director or thoughts for the other board members. And, I'm filling time just to give you time to prep for whatever you might think of. I'll allow you to begin.
I want to thank Dylan and Dr. B and Mary Beth and, and the board. To me, this is educational, it's exciting, I see the vision or the view for the school, the future. I know, learn so much. I mean, by just listening and the hard work you guys put in and you try to explain, share your vision with us, Dr. B. And I know this is a good school. And as an educator, I'm excited because this school is going to expand, not just IIA, it's going to help in a different area. Because our cities, they need good school, really good school. And if we can be the sample, think about a good school in a area that usually kids going over there, they're not getting what they need to. And we set a good example. So I'm excited for the other school, whatever. And I know by looking at the way that we carefully use our finances, so on, I think we'll be fine. I'm not worried about it. I think it just, look forward to, but I think we definitely need to be careful, step by step. And so really excited about this.
Yeah, I think there's some growing pains and some natural motivation to want to look at other school sites and other types of schools, given where we're currently at. But I think given the nature of how things are in terms of dates and needing to file and all these, we have to look ahead and take some steps, at least provide some plan or path forward, whether we choose to take all the steps or a few of the steps, we at least put the infrastructure in place. So I just, first of all, I want to commend you, Dr. Bean, for taking the initiative on this, because I feel like these type of discussions are really moving the school forward. We're talking about high school for IA, it's amazing, right? And talking about looking forward to what the what we're gonna be able to do for the students, the smart boards, all the things. I think it's very exciting. I want to commend the board because you guys are fantastic to have these thoughts and concerns and want to push the executive director and the team here to excel, to make sure that we're on a sure footing for all the students here, for all the staff, for longevity of IA. I'm confident as well, Roy, that we will make the right decision. So I appreciate you guys and being actively involved in the process.
Your thoughts? Well, so first of all, the comment, Dr. Bean and team to come up with the initiatives, which is really, and it's a sort of provoking, and I think that drives discussion, which is good. It's basically making sure everyone share the vision, and I think as I mentioned earlier, I'm excited and thrilled to see it's coming, and because even if you don't discuss the expansion, one time having just a chit chat with another board member, right? Yeah, just in private. I said, hey, maybe at some point we ought to think about expanding into, south. All right, I have a personal interest because I want to see this happening. I said, hey, maybe what if you set up something in Mission Vehicle area, and okay, to take advantage to cover all the way from San Juan Capistrano, Laguna Niguel, Laguna Hill, Colo de Casa, Lake Forest. We talk about the possibility. I'm very, very happy to see you have the vision and the ambition to expand this beyond the Irvine International Academy. Right, that's the one. I wanted to really comment you on that. And also appreciate the board members of all take this very, very seriously. We think about from a resource standpoint, personnel, and that's good. Just to make sure we all can come on board, quote unquote, on board. Okay. And so I feel confident we're going to get there. And even if I'm not on the, doesn't mean I don't support this long-term vision. My concerns really can be expanded, one way and just one way only, not the other way. So we're going to come to a point to discuss the possibilities of setting where to pick up the right location and based on the demographics. And I'm glad that you mentioned that. That's the word term I also want to bring up. Thirdly, I also want to comment on Delano's effort. Every time when you're sitting here to give a very detailed discussion, leading us to really into the numbers to digest and try to comprehend what the numbers actually means, right? And I think it's great. And you did a lot of work. You spent a lot of time on this. Very good. All the numbers, and would be very, very nice. Sometimes we can just kind of focus on some of the key points and the key drivers, and also because I don't think that any board member will remember all the numbers we discussed last time and the quarter before. Yes.
Good comments from the board members, or executive director, and one another. I'll finish with this. In the very few times I've had to write a resume or update a resume in the objective area, I always put my objective was to participate on a team of, professionals bringing our unique skills and qualities to build something of value that would endure over time.
Mm.
And that we're doing that. This school is something of great value and it's gonna endure over time. May endure our stays on the board, you know, very possibly. And so it's just a privilege to be a part of this team, including the administrative team, of course, as well. And so with that, I'll make a motion that we adjourn our meeting. Look for a second. Molly seconds, and we'll go down the line. Molly?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, and Brett? Aye. And David? Yeah. And Felipe?
Yes.
All right, well, thank you, everybody, and that adjourns our meeting. Thank you. You guys, that's great. Thanks, guys. All right.